Dave, it's almost time, but I was thinking maybe you could tell us about your t-shirt before we start.
Absolutely. Just cleaning. I'm just going to kill a couple apps on my desktop to make sure we don't end up with my Mac sounding like a jet engine taking off partway through here. Um,
Sorry, I didn't give you a heads up on this. I
no,
just
that's all good. Let me make sure I get the slide back up there. Okay, cool. So Leah was asking about my shirt, which says 1 trillion flags on it. For those of you who are more familiar with Product Plan than with Split, Split is a feature flagging and data associated with feature flagging platform. We let you do feature flagging and have data that comes in with it. And we recently passed a milestone of 1 trillion flags out there, which is one of those kind of mind-boggling numbers. I have an 8-year-old daughter, and she came to the kitchen the other day and actually walked me through, 10 tens is 100, and she went all the way up, to 1 trillion. She's like, that's just a really big number. So I thought that was pretty awesome.
yeah, it is a big number.
It is.
But
Thankfully, they're not all being handled one by humans. They're being
that's true.
consumed. Interestingly enough, I mean, they're actually being assumed one by humans. I mean, consumed rather. Like, so that means there's that many people interacting with that many applications that often. It is kind of mind-boggling, actually, at some level, to think about that.
Well, thank you for sharing. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot. We are going to get kicking this off, get started. It's 11:01 Pacific time. So let's reward those who showed up on time. Welcome to the webinar. I am Leah Hanson. I work at Split. I do marketing, and I wanted to welcome you all to Agility Comes From Within, Building Adaptable Product and Teams. And so I am just so excited that we are here with Annie today and Dave, but Annie is the Vice President of Product Management at ProductPlan. And then Dave Carroll is my colleague, and he's a continuous delivery evangelist, and we do a lot of things together, and he's great, and Annie's great. And so we are excited to dive in and hear her story and Product Plan story. And we think you're gonna learn a lot and have a lot to think about when you walk away from this. So I encourage you to put your questions and comments either in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll get to them. And then we also are recording this, so we'll send this out as well. And just, enjoy it and leverage the great minds that we have here today. So on that note, I will hand it off to you, Dave.
Thanks so much. And full disclosure, I used to be a product manager myself at one point in my career, and lots of props to you, Annie. I didn't really want to wear that many hats, but the subtitle here, using your PM skills to build your team's capacity to adapt and thrive. And I don't want to give away too much of what Annie's going to cover, but really as a product manager, we have skills we use to figure out what our customers want and need. And we, Annie will get into how, if you turn those skills inward towards how you build product, some pretty important things can happen. Before we start, I just want to explain, how do we get here? So the folks at Product Plan and Split, we know each other, and I published a blog called Adaptability in Software Development Must Be Powered by Informed Action. And we were kind of thinking, we'd like to have a conversation about this. And we approached the team at Product Plan, and we really hit it off in terms of, oh, no kidding, and you should hear what we've done lately internally with this exact topic. So that was a very cool thing. For those who don't already know me, my focus for years has been on sustainability in software delivery, right? How do we make it possible to do what we do with more value but less drama? Like, how do we do it in a way where we can deliver value, have a good time, make things happen, but actually we don't chew people up. We don't burn people out, right? And so I talk about, less drama and less friction along the way. And when I was writing this blog post, I ran into a piece of writing that Harvard Business Review did clear back in 2011, which was titled Adaptability, the New Competitive Advantage. And what they were saying way back then was, guess what? If you're giant and you're a huge incumbent, that's not good enough anymore. Actually, your ability to adapt to change and figure out what the market really needs and do something meaningful with it, maybe have a really good product roadmap, wink, wink, will be the thing that makes a difference, right? And I thought it was very interesting some of the specific stuff they called out. Environments that encourage knowledge flow, diversity, autonomy, risk-taking, sharing, and flexibility on which adaptation thrives. So rather than command and control, rather than having some frozen vision of what you have to accomplish in the next 3 years, actually the ability to adapt, right? And here's sort of the TLDR from the blog. I'm just going to give you some of the headings that were in there. One of my headings was change is trending still, because frankly, to quote an article from 2011 in 2020 about what companies need to do in order to get with the program is kind of interesting, right? It's like some people are way ahead on this and others are still just trying to wrestle with how do we actually become more inherently adaptable? And then I gave some examples. And one of the examples is kind of an interesting one, which is the whole idea of local team autonomy. At Whole Foods, which is obviously a brick and mortar grocery store, they actually have local team control in the stores. The teams have veto over hiring. They choose their own products, and they're directly incented for their productivity very often. I believe it's every 4 weeks or something. And instead of it being decided in an ivory tower, or maybe it's not an ivory tower in Austin, it's probably a nice big building, but they're doing it at the local level, right? And then I had another one, hiring for adaptability and bias for action at Netflix. And if you don't already know, Netflix has this sort of, we hire only A players and then we get out of their way of doing things. And their focus is specifically, how do I not constrain my employees, but unleash their creativity? And then at Pinterest, they're like, well, we can't all afford to hire at the sort of 125th percentile of salary and give people 6 months severance after 3 weeks if they don't work out, which those are practices at Netflix, by the way. They look at it as onboarding, and they focus specifically on how do we onboard people to be able to ask the right questions? How do we get them into the big data system? How do we actually equip them to not to just get certain things done, but to actually figure out what's interesting and what's meaningful? And then lastly, this notion that adaptability requires experimentation, and it requires it both within your own team, like how do I run my team, and also within your product and your customer base, right? So I thought it was really interesting. Now, last night I was sort of looking, is there a way I can summarize this? And right in the HBR article, there was this summary button, and I clicked it, and I thought these were some very interesting words, right? They've worked out how to experiment rapidly and frequently, not only with products and services, but also with business models, processes, and strategies. And then this, and perhaps most important, they have learned to unlock their greatest resource, the people who work for them. So Annie, imagine, like, given the theme of our, like, I was sort of like, okay, this is relevant. And so in summary, and so I'm going to hand it over to Annie, and I just wanted, we're all on a journey, right? And I think one of the things we're going to find is that having a common mission and an energized team heading on a common mission is super important. And you don't just get there automatically. You don't get there by giving people stock options. You don't get there by publishing a roadmap. That's not how it happens. And Annie is super generous to share with us kind of that process they went through in taking a look inward and what they did to get on that journey and get sort of a more interesting vibe going on. So I'm going to pass it off to your first slide here. Anyway, go ahead.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. And thank you, Leah, for that very kind intro. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here with you today. One thing I've learned and relearned over my career is that to be truly adaptable, to be a truly agile team, you have to have a culture and a team that really supports it. And it doesn't mean that you have to be that team today. It just means that you have to be somewhere that's open to it. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of a journey through ProductPlan's history. This slide itself's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it actually captures where we were as a team when I joined. ProductPlan has always had a remote engineering team. And at the beginning, it worked really well. The engineers had known each other previously. They were a small group. They were pairing constantly, talking about what they were building and why. They were very much lockstep and understood what was happening. But as the team grew, there were some things we really took for granted. What we didn't take for granted were all the best practices around Agile and product delivery. We checked all the boxes. We were great at talking to customers. We were great at validating ideas. We had sprints, we had retros, we had all the right ceremonies, but we weren't getting features out the door. We had everything, all of our releases were a little light. We tended to be behind schedule. Our internal teams weren't really excited about what we were doing. They were just hoping that we would do something. And we weren't really happy with where we were. What we started to realize was there was no number of processes we could introduce that were going to get us to where we wanted to go, that this problem was bigger than the surface level. Which, as Dave mentioned earlier, you know, applying product to your team, you start with empathy, and you really need to start at what's happening on the inside. So we started to recognize, although we walked the Agile walk and we talked all the modern talk, we weren't delivering an adaptable product, and we were absolutely not an adaptable team. So I love this slide. It was created by Jamie Kircher, who consults around customer experience and the customer journey. And it's not specific to product and engineering teams, but I think it does really a nice job of capturing some of the problem. As businesses, as employees, we tend to focus on the front stage. We are very focused on what's the customer experience? What are our sales conversion rates? What does NPS look like? And we tend to lose sight of the backstage. And what's happening in the backstage is really the core, and it's what's manifesting itself in the front stage. So we were fortunate enough to have a friend of the company come and sit with us and point out that really successful teams have to start with trust and openness. We talked with her a lot, and after some time, we decided that it was time for us to create a commitment and some space for us to figure out how we wanted to work as a team. It didn't mean development stopped and all the systemic problems persisted, and we kind of had to deal with it, but we shifted our focus to how we were going to work. And I'd love to say everybody was really excited about it, but there was also a fair amount of cynicism. So we put a lot of time in. We read a lot of books. We had a lot of expensive meetings where we sat and just talked about what it meant to be a team that was lockstep and what it meant to be to have trust. And that commitment to trust meant both understanding why it didn't exist in the first place and really taking the time to build it. It doesn't happen overnight. These types of things are, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, can we go back to the first slide again? Because actually, I think there's some questions that came in, and what we wanted to ask is when you were saying that you're walking the Agile walk and all the things that, what was it that really was like, okay, this is not working for us? And what was the like driving force of like, all right, we actually really need to look into what's not working?
There's a couple of angles I can answer that. One is, I think the initial instinct, and we were founder run at the time, the initial instinct was to push harder. And I think it's hard when you're in a situation where you're founder run to push back. And so what we saw instead was the engineering team stepping away and it being in a remote environment. It felt like people were hiding rather than like stepping up to really contribute. So one thing you can do is just say, well, we hired the wrong people, but we knew better than that. So that was indicative for us. We fortunately had this friend of the company who was an Agile coach, and we actually thought we were bringing her in to help talk about our processes. Maybe we were delivering the wrong level of detail and user stories. And she's the one who really turned it on her head and said, this isn't about process for you guys. This is about how your team's working together.
Cool. Right.
And was that pretty obvious to you then when she brought that, like surfaced that, where you're like, was it like a light bulb went off and you're like, yeah, this is it? Or did it take a little bit of introspection of it?
You know, I think both. I think we all looked at it and said, well, yeah, there isn't a whole lot of trust here. But knowing how to fix that and really having a belief that you can, I think there was a lot of cynicism on that front. Just because you know what the cause of the problem is doesn't mean that you fully believe you're going to get to the other side.
Right, right.
Cool. Okay.
All right. Thanks for letting me interrupt.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. You know, back to our journey, as I started to say, changes didn't happen overnight, and trust is something you have to build and you have to pay a lot of attention to. But we really did have that commitment to making sure that everybody bought in to first how we were working as a team, second, what we were trying to accomplish as an organization, and then lastly, in terms of how we were going to actually do it. And as that evolved, it was, I wish I had a graph to demonstrate this. Value started coming out more quickly. We were having more open conversations earlier in the process. We were delivering more value. We also, I think, learned that if you have that adaptable team, if you have that openness and trust, there's a lot in the process you can work around. The process should support what you're doing, not sort of direct you how you're going to do it. So,
yeah. A question for you here. So
sure.
how do you deal with the naysayers and cynicism? I mean, like you mentioned initially, people are like, okay, yeah, duh, that's happening, but how are we going to change it because we have this and this and this that are true, and you know, therefore we're stuck. I mean, you can get that sort of sense of being stuck, right?
Right. We had a couple of things that really helped us. We started with the book Crucial Conversations, which at least built us all into talking about things in the same way, and it didn't rely on one person being the expert. It was critical that our team leads bought into this and thought it was worthwhile, because they needed to be able to have very frank one-on-one conversations with individuals to make sure that they felt heard. We also had to be patient. And I will admit, by the end of all of the process, we did have one or two people who self-selected out, who just didn't want to work in the environment that we were building.
Right. Related. So another question came in from chat. Do you think that, they're saying, does Agile work for non-software products with longer life cycles? But I think really, does the modern approach to building product, whether that's going to be called Agile or what, like, does this work with non-software products that have longer life cycles?
Right. I think that's a great question. And, I in my role, talk to product managers across industries all the time. Mm-hmm. I think Agile is a suggested methodology. And I think the value of Agile in terms of figuring out how you deliver the smallest piece of value quickly can apply anywhere. It's certainly, you're going to have a little bit of the water Agile. We have customers who have 5-year roadmaps that just in order, all of the dependencies down the road have to get to be that way. Wow. But there are pieces, engineers make hundreds of decisions a day, and making sure that parts of the methodology that help them understand the context, that understand the problem you're trying to solve, that why you're building what you're building, can help you move quickly and more agilely if you have that knowledge base.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think that next week I'll be speaking with an author of a book that really talks about there's lean and there's agile. Like there's different aspects of these things. And in one of the key here is when there's uncertainty, when you don't know what the answer is, you've got to do a probe. You have to actually try something and get some feedback. And whether that's a clay model or a drawing or whatever, like you don't want to spend 6 months between, I think we have the right idea and did we do it? You think, do we need it? Right. There needs to be a way to get feedback much faster instead of assuming that you can figure it all out in a vacuum.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite examples in design thinking, and I'm not going to remember any of the names, but I'll give you the high level story. There was a contest out there to see who could build the first plane to fly across a lake. And what they saw were multiple teams who were designing it all over 6 months. And then they'd go and try and they'd fail and they'd come back to the table and start all over. And then one team came out and said, we're going to fly something every day. And we're going to get it wrong, but we're going to figure it out quickly. And they were the team that ended up winning the competition.
All right, should we go to the next slide?
Yeah, absolutely. So this quote was recently shared at the industry conference, and I think it really encapsulates the goal of an adaptable team. You don't want to be giving people task lists. You want to energize them about where you're headed. In our case, there's been a lot of iterations to help get us there. It's not a one and done process, especially as the team continues to grow and evolve. It is really the key to our success and how we move forward. We've changed a lot. We did change the premise for our workflows. We're based more now on Basecamp's Shape Up methodology, and in large part because they front load collaboration, asking questions, building buy-in, making sure there's a lot of time carved out for that through the process so that the rest of the process feels much better. And to Dave's point about asking questions, we question everything. Starting with meetings and ceremonies, why do they exist? Are we getting what we want out of them? An answer for a meeting might be, as a remote team, we just need to see each other once in a while, and that's totally fine. But everybody needs to feel like they can buy into that. and that they can ask that question. And those questions, they range from why are we doing this to have we created the best solution? Do we really understand the customer problem? And that's actually a great place to be as a product person, to have your engineers asking those questions, because it shows that they really care about where you're headed. Our retros serve to look at the past sprint, as you know, most retros do, but the majority of our time is spent talking about what we want to experiment with process-wise, how we want to be better, how we continue to build energy and don't feel like we're stuck. And when people do feel like they're stuck, what do we need to do to make sure that that's, you know, taken care of? And again, the empathy part. As a result, we're moving a lot faster than I ever dreamed. We're regularly delivering customer value. I'd say we have a highly adaptable product. And I feel a lot better about the decisions we're making as a whole. We're no longer running into V3 of a feature that's never been seen by a customer. And as a result, our internal stakeholders, our internal teams are really excited, not only about what we're doing, but where we're headed. And I think our customers feel that energy from us as well. You know, it hasn't been an easy road. There have been a lot of bumps, but it's all been worth it. And I think it's also fair to say we're all having a lot more fun as a result also.
Yeah, I was at GoTo Copenhagen last year, and it was interesting. One of the talks was actually about the twice failure of NASA to stop a shuttle from blowing up. And a lot of that had to do with communication. But what was really weird was having a speaker bring it all back to fun. It's like when people are having fun, they just do better things and they make better decisions. When they're under the sort of pressure of, we have to do it this way, we have to do it now, and we, you know, just salute and move on, you know, that really bad stuff happens. So when it's command and control, and when it's, I know it sucks, but we got to do it anyway, there's just a lot of bad artifacts from that. Whereas if you know, we're professionals, we're good at this stuff, we should constantly be getting better at our trade, and it's fun to be good at what you do and making a difference, right? And for your product to be making a difference, like, right? Way more fun. A couple questions here. So how do you keep it going? One of the questions is sort of, how do you know, this isn't a one and done process. You don't sort of, oh, well, we've transformed ourselves and now we can just move on, right? And so does that affect onboarding? You know, has hiring changed? Like, so how do you take this journey you're on, and how do you sort of keep iterating?
Yeah, it's absolutely a journey, and it affects everything. It does affect onboarding, it affects hiring, how we hire, who we hire. Needs to be somebody who's not only going to buy into the way we do things, but be excited about it and appreciate the opportunity to participate in that way. We really encourage everybody who's new to ask a lot of questions. There are no stupid questions. They might have seen something better that we're not doing. We also really hope to learn from people who are joining. We also are fortunate that our leadership team entirely buys into this, because, you know, especially with what's going on in the world these days, the energy bit can be really hard. And so it's a company missive to make sure that we are finding ways to help people refuel, that to recognize that there are impacts on this that are outside of the work day to day, and making sure that we find the space and the time to really support our employees.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. The shirt I'm wearing, the Trillion Flags shirt, was a surprise. Like, I opened my mail one day and there was this shirt, you know, 1 trillion flags. And I knew what it meant. I knew we hit the milestone of 1 trillion flags at Split, but it wasn't something, you know, please be on the lookout for, you know, it wasn't like, you know, you need to wear this to a trade show we're shipping it to you. It was literally, everybody in the company got this as a surprise in the mail. And we've done other things. Last week, we actually had llamas from Bolivia that joined us on our Zoom. They sort of Zoomed on in. We had these people from Bolivia who give tours, and they're not giving a lot of tours in person right now, as you might imagine, but they had this team explain the history of Bolivia and the history of llamas and stuff, and it was really cool.
I'm making a note. That's awesome.
Yeah, by the way, it's callallama.com.
Okay.
and very reasonable and very cool. So can you give an example, audience question, can you give an example about a new process you implemented? So something specific that you're doing differently now because you've gone through this process.
Sure. I think, you know, on the previous question, one of the things we do now is a campfire, where the team brings other things outside of work that they're passionate about, and they have that as a topic. And it's just a way to build that team and energy outside of just the day-to-day. But when I first joined, we had a team stand-up. Everybody from the engineering team joined the stand-up every day at the same time. That meeting has now evolved. It evolved to just team leads and myself, QA and design. It then evolved to just being 3 days a week because that was enough. People felt like they were repeating each other. It's actually now evolved that it's a meeting between QA and myself because of all of our other meetings. That's about the right level of contact we need. So while, you know, a daily stand-up is a recommended best practice, it means something very different for us. We have teams of 3. They're very much in touch. They connect every day. Whether or not that's at a stand-up is up to them to decide.
Right. Right. So you're constantly kind of tweaking and saying, hey, is this really necessary, or what would be better?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Absolutely. Okay. So let me see if other questions really quick here. Let's talk about onboarding and hiring, right? Like, you know, I was so when they opened the IKEA in Palo Alto, and it's many years ago now, I'm not sure how many years ago that was, but, you know, the hiring sign said, we're hiring Y-sayers. I was like, we're hiring Y-sayers? Like, that's very interesting, you know? And as I dug into that, this is really about, they don't want to hire people that say, what should I do? But why do we do it this way? Or why don't we consider this? Or, right? And so I think when you and I were talking about ahead of the webinar, I think you're talking about, this is kind of a change in what you're looking for when you hire and how you screen, and it's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, there's a consultant mindset or a contractor mindset that is, here's the thing I need you to deliver. Here's what I expect out of a sprint, or tell me what you can commit to based on story points. That is very different than, here's the customer problem we want to solve. One of my favorite ways to look at product development is innovation really can and should come from engineering. If you've got your hands on what's possible with technology, and you have your hands on the customer problem, right, the intersection of those two things can be really inspiring. So making sure you're hiring and onboarding people who want to be part of that type of problem solving can really help your product evolve quickly. Like I mentioned earlier, we're not perfect. We're learning every day. So not only do we want people who ask us why we're doing things, but we want them to have an opinion. We want them to bring things to the table we might want to experiment. We don't want people who can just write good code quickly.
Right, because writing something that's not having empathy or intimacy with the customer and writing code means the code may even be correct, but it may not be useful.
Right.
Yeah. I thought was interesting, some takeaways from the conversations you and I had before we built this webinar was, I think I came away with these three of the takeaways that I thought were important. Do you want to just speak to them really quick?
Sure. I think when that slide was presented to me about front stage, backstage, it was presented from the angle of, you know, when it's something personal in your life, people always tell you have to start internally first. And there's no reason, it makes sense that that would extend to the people doing jobs. But you need to understand root causes. And I think it's easy to focus on the outcomes or the symptoms opposed to what's really happening. On the empathy front, that's what product people are supposed to be good at. We're good at in and listening and trying to uncover what the problem is, not really be focused on the solution. And it's easy to lose that in our product processes. But I think taking a step back, saying what's happening here and do we have a sense of why can be really, really important, especially in areas where there's friction or it feels like there's room for optimization. And then lastly, trust doesn't only happen overnight, but it's not a guaranteed forever. You have to earn and you have to keep. So making sure you keep that perspective. Similarly, you don't, few car once and then you're done. Like once you figure out what it feels like to be running full speed, finding ways to continue to supplement that. And at times that can mean we're going to take a week and not run full speed because we know that that's what we need as a team, can be really important.
Awesome. So I just realized, I just realized that we actually juiced up this slide a little bit since the last time I peeked and we're coming up on the half hour. I think these are some of the things we talked about, and we're going to send out a recording to everybody from today. Your book recommendation, Crucial Conversations, is in here. This notion of a campfire, how you've evolved the sort of team stand-ups and making it make sense. So we'll send a follow-up email to anybody who's on the call. I really want to thank you for kind of we've probably kind of just scratched the top of this, right? But I think what I was hoping was people would get, don't forget to stop and look inward and figure out, like, how are we doing this? And don't just try harder. Like, don't just push faster towards, sometimes it's, don't be on a death march. Like, don't just be, faster, that makes no sense, go, right? And people can follow the Product Plan folks. They can follow Split. They can catch us on Twitter. You guys have a great blog post, blog series that you can always be watching. And we'll send some follow-ups by email for people. And just super quick, if those of you who are from one side or the other, Split, again, come check us out. We're a feature flagging and experimentation and data sort of related tool that engineering and product teams use. And Product Plan is, about road mapping and making it super easy and super useful to be sharing and making roadmaps. So on that note, I'm going to call it the half hour point here and thank everybody for their time. Annie, thanks so much for bringing your story. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both. And I was just, we had some questions that we didn't get to, which I thought would be the case. So Annie will get those questions to you and then we can send those out. So thank you both. And thank you everyone for attending.
Have a great day, everybody.